Hi, I'm Janice Law. I'm the founder of the American Women Writers National Museum. The American Women Writers National Museum has begun the 50 State Project. Every month we honor women writers, premier women writers, from 4 states. And this month in April, we're honoring women writers from the District of Columbia, Florida, Georgia, and Hawaii. As you can see, it's in alphabetical order. And what happens is after we hold a program that month, I recruit from the audience volunteers, so to speak, to do readings from these famous women authors. So keep in mind, this is sort of like a family presentation. These very gracious people just got their scripts not too long before this, so they're really good sports for doing these readings. So we'll have a reading from an author from each one of the 4 states. And we're going to start with the District of Columbia. By the way, the poster that I'm reading from is posted on the Autumn website, www. American Women Writers National Museum, and you can print it out free. It's a free poster with these great American women writers on it. And the first American women writer from District of Columbia is Isabel Wilkerson. She was born in the District of Columbia in 1961. She won the 1994 Pulitzer Prize in Journalism for coverage of the Midwestern floods, and a profile of a 4th grader from Southside Chicago. Wilkerson was the first black woman to win the Pulitzer Prize for Journalism. She has also received the George S. Polk Award and the Journalist of the Year Award from the National Association of Black Journalists. The second woman is Pulitzer winner Lenora Spiever, who lived from 1872 to 1956. The daughter of a count, she was a popular poet and violinist. In 1927, she received the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry for her collection Fiddler's Farewell. And we're going to have a reading from Fiddler's Farewell in just a moment. She authored numerous poetry collections. She was featured in several anthologies and also won, in addition to Pulitzer, the Golden Rose Award. The third and last author we're going to honor from the District of Columbia is playwright and professor Paula Vogel, who was born in 1951. She rose to prominence with her play, The Baltimore Waltz, about AIDS-related issues. Although she won the Obie Award for Best Play in 1992, she is best known for her piece, How I Learned to Drive, which won the Pulitzer Prize for Drama in 1998. Her other compositions include And Baby Makes 7, 1984, and The Long Christmas Ride Home, 2004. So now we have our guest reader, and if she would introduce herself, tell a little about herself, and read from the work, Pulitzer winner of Lenora Spiever.
Good afternoon. I am Linda Reese Davidson. I am an attorney in Washington, D.C., originally from New York, and I'm going to read, I don't have the title.
It's the Fiddler's Farewell.
The Fiddler's Farewell. What is a violin? Who shall reveal this mystery of thin, vibrating wood, of forest voice multi-voiced, wind, rain on many leaves, bent branches moaning under the crash of clouds that meet, the cool, pale hiss of snow and birds, and puttering furry feet, young cries along the leaves. All musics and all scenes seeping and soaking into the very core of the green bud of destined fiddle wood, long, long before. The mastermind conceives, the hand achieves the carven whole, the curving sides, the twisted scroll, shapes it and stains it to this red russet thing of expectant string, names it, invests it, with its adolescent voice, fondles it, fingers it, breasts it. How light it seems, swinging between the abdicating finger and thumb. How frail this unbarred stronghold of sweet gold. All fortunes and all raptures and all dreams, kind horned of plenty. And who shall count the glittering sun? Words for my fiddle now, abundance of goodly words, my deft, my dear, my witty one. With your brave answers ever ready, my box of birds, crony and hardy, winged, hubbub, tool, and tear. Fiddler, fiddle, to leave you lying here. Let me declare that music never dies, that music never dies. Let me in potent mood create of this my fantasy of faith, a little paradise, immaculate, true as the test string is true. For all the lovely cries of all the violins, and mine too. In time, a stranger with the supple fiddler's hand and the rapt eye that sees the sound sublime will come, must come, I wish it so, to coax these stagnant strings, kindle their numb and awful apathy with one imperative blow. Of the feet accurate bow, release the fiddle cry. O faithless, faithful only to sound, that loud-lipped passerby, you will forget straightway the player for the player, and both for the tune you play. How still it lies, an empty shell along the empty sand is not more still. But put your hand to the shining thing as music passes. Do you feel the quickening of the languid wood? Come, lay your ear to the shell, heart leaning near, so near. Do you hear the stirring and the throbbing above your tuneless sobbing? Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. That's beautiful. It's hard to believe that people got these scripts just about 10 minutes ago. That was a wonderful performance. Thank you so much. Now we're moving on to the state of Florida. And the women authors women writers we're honoring from Florida are two remarkable, feisty, mega-talented writers who lived in parallel time periods. Relentless reporter and fearless crusader, Presidential Medal of Freedom winner Marjory Stoneham Douglas, 1890 to 1998, was still advocating for preserving the Everglades until shortly before her death at age 108.
Ooh.
Her 1947 book, River of Grass, depicted the Everglades as a national treasure, not a swamp to be drained for developers' profit. Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings, we're going to have a reading from Miss Rawlings, 1896 to 1953, who chronicled rural Florida life, won the 1939 Pulitzer Prize for fiction for The Yearling, about a boy who adopts an orphan fawn. In 1956, she won a posthumous Newbery Medal for her children's book, The Secret River. She was friends with major writers of her era, including Zora Neale Hurston and Mary McLeod Bethune. Karen Russell's debut novel, Swamplandia, was named a finalist for the 2012 Pulitzer Prize for fiction. Her short stories have been featured in anthologies and publications, including the Best American Short Stories, Granada, and The New Yorker. Russell, 1981, she's still living, received the 2001 Baird Fiction Prize and the New York Public Library's 2012 Young Lions Fiction Award. She is a writer-in-residence at Baird College. Last is nationally syndicated columnist Kathleen Parker. She was born in 1951 in Winter Haven. She wrote the book Save the Males, Why Men Matter, Why Women Should Care, and has written for the Baltimore Sun, Cosmopolitan, and Time. She won the H.L. Mencken Writing Award in 1993 and the Pulitzer Prize for Journalism Commentary in 2010. And we have someone to read from the works of Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings. And if you would introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you. And she'll be reading from The Yearling.
Thank you for this opportunity, Janice, and thank you for the work you're doing on this wonderful project. I am Glenn Marcus. I'm a documentary film writer and producer. Born and raised in Baltimore, knocked around a bit, and I've been in Washington for a long time since. I also am an adjunct at Johns Hopkins University. So this is chapter 15 of a book that many of us read, and many also saw the film, The Yearling. Jody moved through a tortuous dream. With his father beside him, he fought a nest of rattlesnakes. They crawled across his feet. trailing their rattles, clacking slightly. The nest resolved itself into one giant snake, gigantic, moving toward him on a level with his face. It struck, and he tried to scream, but could not. He looked for his father. He lay under the rattler, with his eyes open to a dark sky. He was dead. His body was swollen to the size of a bear. He was dead. Jody began to move backward away from the rattler, one agonized step at a time. His feet were glued to the ground. The snake suddenly vanished, and he stood alone in a vast, windy place, holding the fawn in his arms. Penny was gone. A sense of sorrow filled him, so they thought his heart would break. He awakened, sobbing. He sat up on the hard floor. Day was breaking over the clearing. A pale light lay in streaks beyond the pine trees. The room was filled with grayness. For an instant, he was still conscious of the fawn against him. Then he remembered. He scrambled to his feet and looked at his father. Penny was breathing with a greater ease. He was still swollen and fevered, but he looked no worse than when the wild honeybees had stung him. Ma Baxter was asleep in her rocker with her head thrown far back. Old Doc lay across the foot of the bed. Jody whispered, "Doc." Doc grunted and lifted his head. "What is it? What is it? What is it?" "Doc, look at Pa." Doc shifted his body and eased himself on one elbow. He blinked and rubbed his eyes. He sat up. He leaned over Penny. "Lord of the Jaybirds, he's made it." Ma Baxter said, "Yeah?" She sat upright. "He dead?" "Not by a long sight." She burst out crying. Doc said, "You look like you're very sorry." She said, "You just don't know what it would mean, him leaving us here." Jody had never heard her speak so gently. Doc said, "Why, you got another man here. Look at Jody now, big enough to plow and reap and do the hunting." She said, "Jody's all right, but he ain't nothing but a boy. Got his mind on nothing but prowling and playing." He hung his head. It was true. She said, "His pa encourages him." Doc said, "Well, boy, be glad you got encouragement. Most of us live our lives without it. Now, ma'am, let's get some more milk down this feller, time he wakes." Jody said eagerly, "I'll go milk, Pa." She said with satisfaction, "About time." He passed through the front room. Buck was sitting up on the floor, rubbing his head sleepily. Mill Wheel was still asleep. Jody said, "Doc says Pa's done made it." "I'll be dogged." I woke up, fixing to go bury him.
Once again, these people are fabulous. I think they had rehearsed this. They're great, good sports. The next excerpt is from state of Georgia, and the women writers we're honoring from Georgia are Mary Hood. She was born in 1946 in Brunswick. She writes short stories about the American South. In 1984, she won the Flannery O'Connor Award for short fiction for her story How Far She Went. Her 1986 work, And Venus is Blue, won the Lillian Smith Book Award and the Townsend Prize for Fiction. The second women writer we've probably all heard of, Rosalind Carter. Although known as the wife of the 39th President of the United States, Rosalind Carter, born in 1927, is a success in her own right. In addition to her activism on behalf of women and children, Carter has authored several books, including her 1984 autobiography entitled First Lady from Plains. That's what we're going to hear the excerpt from. She is also a prominent advocate for the mental health community. In 2010, she co-authored a book discussing the mental health struggle titled Within Our Reach, Ending the Mental Health Crisis. She has been named Georgia Woman of the Year and has also received the Jefferson Award for Public Service. The last woman writer from Georgia is Georgia Douglas Johnson, 1877 to 1966. She was a poet and popular figure in the Harlem Renaissance. Her first poem, published in 1916, would be followed by many others. Some of her works include The Heart of a Woman, 1918, Bronze, 1922, and A Sunday Morning in the South. In 2010, Johnson was inducted into the Georgia Writers Hall of Fame. To read from the work of Rosalind Carter, we have someone. Would you come and introduce yourself, please? And tell us a bit about yourself.
My name is Michael Ravnitsky. I am originally from Brooklyn, New York, and I live in Silver Spring, Maryland with my wife and 2 young sons, and both of them love the written word. Jimmy has always said that you can find time to do things you want to do, but I've learned there are times when you're so busy you can't do everything, but we seem to be doing everything. Besides the work and our new responsibilities, we were having fun. We played golf, we took dancing lessons, and we went to the college in Americus to take a speed reading course. We broke Plains tradition and closed our warehouse on Saturday afternoon so we could go camping and spend more time with the boys. Every year we went fishing in Florida with our friends and all the children, and we also went to Sebring to the automobile races. Once we flew to Cuba with reservations for one night and stayed 2, leaving at 5 a.m. the next morning after staying up the whole night long. We saved $300 for a trip to New Orleans with friends, but instead of budgeting this time, we decided to do anything we wanted until the money ran out. It lasted for 4 days. We stayed up all night, every night, slept every morning, ate pompano and papayat, having no idea what to do when the fish arrived in a paper bag, drank wine with lunch for the first time, and much, much chicory coffee. We also went to the horse races and spent hours listening to good jazz.
This next part he's going to read is, that was their life before Plains, and now the Carters, he's served his time, and he has lost the election, and so this is the time toward the end of their administration.
Though we were both raised in the South and had accepted segregation as children,
No, well, I'm sorry. You can read that if you want, but that's right. I got it now.
okay. I got the final bad news from Pat Cadell. The early figures had slipped, he told me in a discouraged tone of voice, but he wouldn't know how serious it was until he got more figures later in the evening. Our friend Tom T. Hall, the country western singer who had performed for the rally, was waiting for me when I finished the telephone call. Well, we did the best we could, he said uneasily. Chin up. Our chins were certainly high on the flight home. Several members of my staff had flown to Huntsville for the rally to be part of an actual event, rather than just part of the planning as they had been for months. We toasted each other with wine and fruit punch and ate the cake the Secret Service agents presented to me, which had First Lady, 4 more years, inscribed in the icing. Mary Hoyt gave a very funny speech about our campaign, and she and Madeline and one of my press aides presented me with a huge gift certificate made from campaign posters for a much-needed new briefcase. When the plane dropped me off in Plains before taking the others on, I feel the love and anxiety and the worry. It was 2 a.m. when I got home. Jimmy was moving from California to the state of Washington on a last-minute campaign swing, since the earlier polls had shown there was a chance of his carrying the West Coast. I tried to call Pat. When his line was busy, all of a sudden I decided not to try again. I knew what he would say and I didn't want to hear it. And at that moment, just 5 hours before the voting booths opened, I faced the truth. We're going to lose, I said to Jack. I know, Mom. I came back home tonight so you wouldn't be all by yourself. It was the first time I had really admitted it to myself, and immediately my thoughts turned to the family. What about Amy at the White House? I worried about them and wished they were all there with me in Plains that night. Jack and I stayed up talking until 3:30. He said that he didn't want to go to bed because he wanted to put off Election Day as long as possible. Amazingly, when I finally lay down for a few hours before getting up to meet Jimmy, I felt sound asleep. Jimmy's helicopter landed in the field by our house at 7:30, and as soon as we looked at each other, we both realized that each understood the bad news. Jimmy smiled at me through his exhaustion, and together we composed ourselves for the television cameras and went to vote. How bad is it? I asked him in the car. He turned thumbs down and said, it's gone. It's all over. He had heard Pat's latest figures on the plane coming home from Seattle, and we were 7 points behind. But no one in Plains knew that. Even when Jimmy's voice broke as he thanked the crowd at the depot, our home folks were optimistic. They say you're going to lose, but we know you're going to win, people kept saying. We're so proud of you. When Jimmy came back from the Oval Office, we were both so exhausted we went into our bedroom to take a nap. I had a momentary surge of hope when Tim Kraft at the campaign headquarters told me that our people around the country were still optimistic, and he couldn't believe Pat's figures. I ran into the bathroom to tell Jimmy who was changing, but he just sat down on the edge of the tub and said, "Pat knows." Thank you.
Very much. Again, these people, I swear that I, by mistake, stumbled onto professional actors and actresses. They're fabulous. The last author we're honoring is from Hawaii. There are two writers. Honolulu native Kiana Davenport is best known for her critically acclaimed novels, Sharp Dialogues and Song of the Exile, which examine the struggles of Polynesian people living in Western society. Her most recent book, House of Many Gods, which is the one we're going to hear a reading from, a Hawaiian family saga, connects with the previous two. Her works have been translated into 14 languages. She received the Elliott Cadiz Award in Literature and a National Endowment for the Arts Writing Fellowship. The second Hawaiian writer is Katie Manger. Born in 1956 in Honolulu, she writes in the genre of tart noir. I had never heard of tart noir, but I'm learning a lot in establishing this museum, a subsection of crime fiction. She is best known for her Casey Jones and Hubbard and Lil book series, though she has written books outside of those series. Manger also writes under the pen names Gallagher Gray and Chaz McGee. We're going to have a reading now from House of Many Gods. And in this particular book, the author, Ms. Davenport, weaves two cultures, the Polynesian culture and the Russian culture. So the first part of the reading will be about the Polynesian culture. The second part will be about the Russian culture. And we have a guest reader. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Jenna Morgan, and I am a policy advisor for Global Witness. And so I'll be reading from...
What is Global Witness? Briefly.
Global Witness is an international advocacy organization, and we're focused on breaking the link between natural resource exploitation, human rights violations, corruption, and conflict. And so I'll be reading from House of Many Gods by Kiana Davenport. Later, a woman named Rayada Huahani rose and talked about her islands of Tahiti and the Tuamotus in French Polynesia, and how the French government's bomb testing had damaged many of her people. Since the 1960s, children as young as 10 and 12 had been conscripted to work at test sites and never given protective clothing. When they began to die, their bodies were so contaminated that they were buried in lead coffins. Then the coffins disappeared. They were flown to France for research. Her voice was deep and strong, like a beautiful wailer, yet she kept it controlled, her emotions in check. Our lagoons are irradiated, our coral dying. We are afraid to eat our fish, to nurse our children, and France will not even give us back our dead. She was stout, big-hipped, and beautiful, with the bronze skin and broad features of Tahitians and Hawaiians. Even the two languages were similar. The earliest settlers to Hawaii had migrated north from Tahiti and the Tuamotus and the Marquesas. These were Anna's closet Pacific cousins, yet she never had been curious about their customs and their mother tongue, so similar to hers. She had never longed to see Tahiti. Later, several Aborigines spoke of how their people were still being monitored by the British and the Australians from the effects of the atomic bombs set off at Montebello, Western Australia in 1952, and in the Great Victorian Deserts of Australia in 1953. Nobody warned us. They just exploded the bloody bombs. Thousands of our clans were out there living in the desert. And this is moving towards the Russian side of the culture. At night, their shipwreck of a house seemed to palpitate, made tremulous by the flickering of blue tubes of the TV in front of which old Ben slept, and the candles lit in various rooms. Nicky liked reading by candlelight. It took him back to his student days in Russia. Adoring young cousins mimic him, doing their homework by candlelight. Sometimes Auntie Pua tottered over, slipped a linty, dried plum from her pocket, and pressed it to his lips. He slid his arms around her waist. "How is my little babushka?" "Oh, you," she cried. "Put your eyes back in that book. By and by, you're going to be one excellent teacher. When you pau making your important film." She still read the Bible every night, though she would never reach the end. Old Uncle Tito had begun using the thin pages of her Bible for rolling his tobacco. She was reading Chronicles, he was smoking Deuteronomy. Autumn turned to island winter, making the ocean rage. White waves stood erect like giant hairs. Some days there was only fog, so thick the world outside their windows disappeared. At night they lay staring at the world, and from the ceilings from which the termite dust filtered down, feathering small hairs of the ridges of their ears and on their cheeks. They watched it sift through candlelight. After our child comes, Nikki said, I will resuscitate the house one room at a time. I'm a good carpenter, you know, and it's your house and you must honor it. Now it's your house too, she said. I'll have to first consult the house, see if it accepts me.
Thank you. Well, thank you all so much. That ends our 50th Day program for the month of April and honoring these fabulous women writers. Thank you.
Good.